some things are harder than others, right? Reading a Dr. Seuss book is easy compared to reading Shakespeare. Filling up gas in your car is a whole lot easier than changing the brakes on your car. Fixing a leaky faucet in your home is a lot easier than running new piping through the whole house. Living a life without Jesus and just doing your own thing is a whole lot easier than giving your life to Him and living under His demands and commands and His love. This morning we're going to be looking at a passage, 1 Corinthians 1, 18 through 31. If you have a Bible, open it up, please, to 1 Corinthians 1, 18 through 31. If you don't have a Bible, we have Bibles in the pew in front of you. Those are those black books. You can grab one of those. I would love for you to have one in front of you that you can follow along. This passage that deals with things that we don't quite understand and why what we believe is so hard and yet so good. And to the world around us that does not trust Christ, that it's confusing. See, the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ is one that declares that there is this one who came and lived and died and rose again from the dead after 3 days being dead. And that the message is to recognize that you are one who is far from perfect, to admit that, to turn away from a life of pursuing everything but God, and to surrender your life to Jesus, who says, come and die with me. That's the message of the gospel. Repent, turn away from a life without Christ, follow Christ, trust Christ, that He is the only way to be made right with a God that we have offended and denied. And in so doing that, we are made into His family. We're His. This is the gospel. This is the good news. This is what we declare to everybody. And this passage that we're going to look at this morning is going to sound strange. It's going to sound strange if you're one who has not trusted Christ. And it's going to sound strange if you have. So if you would, as we do each week, would you please stand if you are able for the reading of God's Word, 1 Corinthians 1, verses 18 to 31. Paul, writing to the Corinthian church in his first letter, says this, "For the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. Where is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God the world did not know God through wisdom, it pleased God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. For Jews demand signs and Greeks seek wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and folly to Gentiles. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. For consider your calling, brothers. Not many of you were wise according to worldly standards. Not many were powerful. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, even things that are not, to bring to nothing things that are, so that no human being might boast in the presence of God. And because of Him, you are in Christ Jesus, who became to us wisdom from God, righteousness and sanctification and redemption, so that, as it is written, let the one who boasts, boast in the Lord." This is the word of the Lord. You may be seated. So in our journey through the Bible in a year, we are at this point where Paul and others are going out on missionary journeys and proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ to people who have not heard this message. And in a short little chunk in this series, this is week 3 of 4 really significant passages of Scripture that Paul has declared, that we might understand the gospel more and might understand the call of Christ more and live that out. And so as these missionaries are going out, they are not going out to conquer lands, they are going out to conquer souls. That people might know their need for Christ. Christ sent Paul to preach the gospel and not to secure a personal following, not to grow his little people. It's to point them to Christ. And Paul wrestles, he shows this in verses 10 through 17. He's not the point of the story. The point of the story is Jesus. And so he's constantly pointing people to him, and amazing things happen. And because amazing things happen, the desire to proclaim this message keeps going out. And that's where we get to today. And what this passage is telling us, what it's proclaiming to us, is that we are to embrace the foolishness of God. Embrace the foolishness of God. That sounds weird. I'm going to explain it in a little bit, but there are 3 ways that we embrace the foolishness of God. The first way that we embrace the foolishness of God is in verses 18 through 19, that we understand the power of God. The message of the cross is folly. The first verse is the thesis statement for his paragraph. You remember writing thesis statements in English class? This first verse is his thesis statement that Paul is going to continue to fill out as he goes through this paragraph, this section. And as he does it, he enlists a contrast. In verse 18, it says for, and then it says but. There's a contrast that he's wanting to lay out. And he begins by telling us the beginning part of this contrast is that the cross, the message of the cross is folly to those who are perishing. The perishing that Paul is describing is a person who has not trusted the gospel, the good news that I just declared at the beginning of this message. They have not put their faith and trust in Jesus alone for salvation, that to be made right with God. And that this message, for that person that has not done that, this message of the cross is folly to those who are perishing. Paul is saying that person is perishing. And you might be here this morning, you have not trusted Christ. And you go, I'm not perishing. No, you are. And so we're all going to die. But there's a perishing that Paul is talking about that is deeper than just dying. It is a full separation from God forever. A separation from his goodness forever. So maybe you've heard this good news. You go, I don't know. I don't know if this is plausible. Maybe it sounds too good to be true. Maybe it sounds too weird. It's folly to the perishing. Why is the cross folly? I was reading a book recently, a few years ago actually, called Onward. It's by Russell Moore. Russell Moore is the president of the Southern Baptist Convention Ethics and Religious Liberty Council. Put that on a business card. That's his title. And in it, he talks about a conversation that he has with a person who thinks the cross is folly. I want you to hear his interaction. He says, I was having another conversation with an atheist. So the subtitle of this book is Engaging the Culture Without Losing the Gospel. How do we engage the people around us with Christ and not lose the good news? So I was doing this. He was engaging an atheist, this time a lesbian progressive activist in a major urban cultural center. That's kind of a atheist, lesbian activist. That's kind of a big deal. And he's engaging her. She wanted to talk to me because evangelical Christianity piqued her interest as a sociological phenomenon. She was most interested in our sexual ethic and peppered me with questions about why we thought certain things were sinful. We had a respectful civil conversation, though she couldn't help but laugh out loud several times when I articulated viewpoints quite commonplace, not only in historic Christianity, but in Judaism and, for that matter, Islam. She said I was the first person she'd ever actually talked to who believed that sexual expression ought only to take place within marriage, and that I was the only person she'd ever met in real life who thought that marriage could only happen with the union of a man and a woman. She said that if she ever met anyone who had seen someone for more than 3 or 4 weeks without having sex, she would not first assume that this person had some sort of a religious conviction, but rather that this person must bear the psychological scars of some sort of traumatic abuse. She followed this up by saying, catch this, "So do you see how strange what you're saying sounds to us, to those of us out here in normal America?" Before I could answer, I was distracted by those 2 words, normal America. How things have turned around. Most of the people in the pews of my church back home would consider themselves to be normal America. They would view this woman, with her sexual openness and dismissal of monogamy, as part of some freakish cultural elite out of touch with traditional values. But I suspect she's right. More and more, she represents the moral majority in this country, committed to family values of personal autonomy and sexual freedom. She is normal now. She snapped me out of my daydream by asking again, "Seriously, do you know how strange this sounds to me?" I smiled, and I said, "Yes, I do. It sounds strange to me too. But what you should know is we believe even stranger things than this. We believe a previously dead man is going to show up in the sky on a horse." Okay, I didn't read that to mock this woman. I read that actually to go, do you understand actually to the world out there how foolish what we believe sounds? So will we embrace the foolishness of God? So then there's this contrast. The contrast in the folly, the power of God is displayed in ways that make most people scratch their head. The Bible declares that the cross saves, exalts, and shows victory. I got this little tidbit from Carolyn Jeffrey. This was so helpful. The cross saves, exalts, and shows victory. But to the first century Middle Eastern person, a person who actually saw people crucified. So Paul is going around, the cross saves. The cross exalts. The cross, what was the other one? Shows victory. That person looking around and seeing crosses on a hillside would go, the cross doesn't save, the cross kills. The cross doesn't exalt, the cross humbles, because they would strip naked anybody who was hung on a cross. The cross does not show victory, it defeats the one who's on the cross. Do you see how radical and crazy what Paul is declaring to the people around that time? Do you see how crazy it is that what we believe? Paul is saying the cross is the power of God. It is not weakness. He says in Romans chapter 1, verses 16 and 17, a passage you might be familiar with, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation, to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith for faith, as it is written, the righteous shall live by faith." God's power is what saves each and every person who trusts him. It takes a lot of power to take something dead and make it alive. And that's exactly what he's done for those who have put their faith and trust in Christ. And this is accomplished through the folly of the cross. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead, the same power that has caused you to be from death to life, the same power that created the world, is the power that saves us to a right relationship with the Father. This cuts at everything that we understand. right? To illustrate this, we understand generally that smart people should be successful. That's how the world is supposed to work. I was poking around trying to search for an example, and I found this. Dr. Maurice Johnson, despite holding a doctorate in plasma physics from Dartmouth College, like one of the Ivy League schools, and a master's in electrical engineering and acoustics from Purdue University, at 55 is homeless and without a job. Like, we see that and we go, that doesn't compute. How can somebody with a PhD in, what was it? Plasma physics, how can they be without a job and homeless? It's the same idea with Christianity. People will look at this and go, this doesn't compute. Doesn't make sense. But God thwarts what the world thinks. The cross, the gospel, this is God's power at work, power in weakness. It's vital for us to keep in mind that we don't ever move beyond the cross. If we move beyond the cross, we lose Christ. We lose Jesus. And so we are called to embrace the foolishness of God. The second way that we embrace the foolishness of God is that we understand the foolishness of God. So I'm not being heretical. I'm not being flippant. It's in text. Verse 25. Look at verse 25. For the foolishness of God is wiser than men. Embrace that foolishness. In verse 20, Paul also mentions foolish. Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? That word foolish could be translated disgustingly stupid. Foolish, disgustingly stupid. This is what Paul is saying, that those who don't believe Jesus look at those who do and go, that is disgustingly stupid, what you believe. And now in this section, Paul is turning that argument around. Going, no, like if you're not trusting Christ, that is foolish. It's disgustingly stupid for your eternal well-being. He begins by asking a series of questions in verse 20. Look at verse 20. Where's the one who is wise? Where's the scribe? Where's the debate over this age? And the rhetorical response, the rhetorical question is demanding a response of nowhere to be found. Why are there nowhere to be found? Well, look at the fourth question. The fourth question is, has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? And the obvious response is, yes, God has made foolish the wisdom of the world. That's why you can't find the wise and the scribe and the debaters, because God has made them foolish. The wisdom of the world. Now hear me on this. There are right and good things that we should learn and grow in and help to better society. There are things that we can learn from the world and grow in. That's not disgustingly stupid. But the wisdom of the world is disgustingly stupid when it comes to matters of eternal significance. If you want to understand eternity, if you want to understand how to be right with the one who created you, you will not find it in the stuff of this world. People try all the time. So how does God's foolishness exhibit itself? I'm going to come back to the foolishness of the world, but how does God's foolishness exhibit itself? You see, you can't know him through the world's wisdom. You can't know him through intellect. You can't know him through signs. This is what the Jews and the Greeks are demanding. We want signs. Show us signs. Show us how great you are. Give us wisdom. Help us to know more. And he's saying, those are not the ways to know me. Not through signs, not through wisdom of this world. And those ideas are the idea of, I think today would be like power. Like we think if we're in power, then we're good. And that's pride. You can't know God through pride. You can't know God through the wisdom and your own intellect. You only know him through a stumbling block. Jesus crucified. And this is the hard part for us. We have this temptation. I have this temptation to want to talk to people in such a way that they go, oh man, that sounds really cool. I can go along with cool, hip Jesus. And that's what Paul was wrestling with. It says in verse 17 that Paul didn't preach the gospel with words of eloquent wisdom. We should be winsome, but we shouldn't seek to try and speak in such a way that people are like, oh, you're amazing. And then in chapter 2, verse 1, the two verses that bracket the passage that we're looking at, he says, I don't use lofty speech or wisdom. Why? Because the cross is a stumbling block, so let's not put pretty flowers on the cross and mute it out. A couple years ago, I used this image for our Easter service. I actually think I probably shouldn't have. Makes the cross look too pretty. It loses the effect of what the cross is. The cross was a place of execution. And not just execution, brutal, horrific execution. People who were crucified could stay up a half a day or more, suffering, just wanting to die, but they couldn't. We cannot miss the brutality of the cross, which is actually why I think it's, wearing a pretty cross around our neck is interesting. Right? If you were wearing a cross around your neck and you're walking around first century Middle East, they'd be like, what are you doing? Like, have you seen what happened? Some people have said, it's kind of like if Christians were to walk around with like an electric chair. No, it's not. Because the cross is worse. It's horrific. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't wear crosses. Don't hear me saying that. But let that cross remind you of the folly of the cross. The folly of what the world looks and goes, what? Why would you believe that? See, the cross is to remind us. If you put a cross on your neck, let that remind you that Jesus declared to us, come and die. That was his message. Follow me and come and die. His message was, take up your cross and follow me. And everybody around there knew, oh, you want me to lose my life for you? Yes, that's what I'm calling you. I'm not calling you to recite this little prayer and you got fire insurance, you're good to go. That's not what I'm calling for. I'm calling for full surrender, giving up of your life, death to self for me. That was the message of the cross. That's still the message today. Don't be offensive, don't be rude, don't be a jerk when you talk to people. But don't miss the cross and what it's calling for. It's calling for all of you, all of me, every bit of us. And that is a stumbling block. Wait. Like, can't I just hang on to my, can I hang on to my pet sins? Can I just do what I want to do? Can I just go wherever I want to be? No. No, you give it up, surrender all. Follow Christ. That's the call. That's a stumbling block. That's hard. Lights and smoke and trying to be cool. You cannot manufacture somebody trusting Jesus. You just can't. The message of the cross is all we have. So will we declare that? This might be foolish to the world, but to us, look at what verse 24 says. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. Jesus is power and wisdom. Is that who Jesus is in your life? See, your power is your wisdom. Or are you trying to be strong and smart on your own? He says, just give it up. I'm your power. I'm your wisdom. Rest in me. And so do you see how this flips on its head? God's foolishness is wiser than the wisest of men. God's weakness is stronger than the strongest of men. You want signs, you want strength, you want wisdom. It's found in Jesus. It's not found in anything in this world. He might crush our pride, but he gives us what we most need. There's a musician, Michael Card. He was a Christian musician who wrote a song called God's Own Fool. I'm just going to recite some of these. He says, "Seems I've imagined him all of my life as the wisest of all mankind. But if God's wisdom, holy wisdom, is foolish to man, he must have seemed out of his mind. When we in our foolishness thought we were wise, he played the fool and he opened our eyes. When we in our weakness believed we were strong, he became helpless to show we were wrong." This song is taken right out of 1 Corinthians 1. And so we follow God's own fool, for only the foolish can tell. Believe the unbelievable and come be a fool as well. So come lose your life for a carpenter's son, for a madman who died for a dream, and you'll have the faith his first followers had, and you'll feel the weight of the beam. So surrender the hunger to say you must know, have the courage to say, I believe. For the power of paradox open your eyes and blinds those who say they can see. So we follow God's own fool, for only the foolish can tell. Believe the unbelievable and come be a fool as well. Come be disgustingly stupid. That's what Paul's saying. Embrace the foolishness of God. And the final way that we embrace the foolishness of God is to understand who to boast in. Now, to understand who to boast in, it's helpful to first know your identity. And in verses 26 through 28, Paul cuts us down. Most of us. Because he says, most of you, 1 Corinthians, and everybody here, most of you, you're not wise, you're not powerful, you're not of noble birth, you are actually low and despised, and you are things that are not. That's encouraging. This is who you are. Now, some of us will see that list in verses 26 and 26 through 28. I'm not wise, I'm not powerful, I'm not of noble birth, I'm low and despised, I'm nothing, I'm a nobody, and we feel the crush, because that's what our culture tells us. You're dumb, you're weak, you're insignificant, you're a nobody. Church, we're in a state, Iowa, just to remind you, that is commonly called the flyover area of this country. Or, because we have I-80, the drive-through country, right? The only reason Iowa is on the blip of the radar of anybody in this country is because we have the first caucus in the presidential elections. Imagine if you lived in North Dakota. Sorry, Bill. We don't matter. People look at this area of the country and go, doesn't matter. We're the dumb ones, the weak, the insignificant, the nobodies. But friends, here's the amazing thing. God chose you. He chose you. If you're his. The one who created societies and cultures, the one who knows everything about you, knows your insignificant status, and he chose you. Isn't that beautiful? I'm just a nobody telling everybody about somebody who saved my soul. Gordon Fee, an author and commentator, says, by bringing good news to the poor through his son, God has forever aligned himself with the disenfranchised. That's us. God chose what is disgustingly stupid. You're not that. But he chose what the world sees as disgustingly stupid as to himself. He called him to himself. Gordon Fee goes on to say, for Paul, the glory of the gospel does not lie in the affluent. Rather, it lies in God's mercy toward the very people whom most of the affluent tend to write off, the foolish, the weak, the despised. Such people do not fit well into the suburban captivity of the church. This message is for everyone. So why does God do this? Why does he call out the dumb and the insignificant and the nobodies? Well, according to verse 29, it's so that no human being might boast in the presence of God. Nothing that we procure in this world, whether it's abilities or stuff, will ever advantage us before God. Nothing. Nothing in my hand I bring, simply to the cross I cling, the old hymn says. The ground is level at the foot of the cross. So if you have much, in terms of resources, in terms of intellect, in terms of whatever, at the foot of the cross, it's gone. And if you have nothing, you're on equal ground with the one who has everything. Why? Because it's about Jesus. It's not about what we have gained or have in this world. It's always been that way. And so you can't boast in anything before the Lord, because he looks at it and goes, it doesn't matter. Have you trusted my son? Do you believe him? Oh, you do? Okay, that's what matters. I don't care about your other stuff. We get super excited when somebody becomes a Christian. Why? Somebody who's famous becomes a Christian, and we get excited about that. Why? Well, that person has so much clout that if they believe, then other people will believe as well. I think that's sometimes our thinking, but I think most of the time actually our thinking is, I won't look as stupid because somebody rich or famous or smart believes, so it makes me look better. We don't need that. Every person who has trusted Christ is a miracle that God has worked in that person's life. God is the hero making us his. Jesus is God's wisdom, and now we see that. We aren't wise, but Jesus is. He is wisdom from God. This is what verses 30 and 31 are talking about. True wisdom is not defined by smarts. It's by what actually we receive from the Lord. And what do we receive? According to verse 30, at the end of verse 30, it says we've received righteousness, sanctification, and redemption. Righteousness is that God's own moral excellence is granted to us. He sanctifies us. He makes us more like him. He's perfecting us in holiness, that we won't be perfect till we're with him, but he's making us that way, and he delivers us. Redemption, he delivers us from sin's penalty. Calls us to himself. This is true wisdom. You want wisdom? These are the things of the wise that we don't secure. He does for us through Christ. It's the gospel. It's the good news. And so Paul wraps up this section by telling us, if you're going to boast in what he's done. Boast in the cross. Because it's on the cross that everything was accomplished. You have nothing else to give. It's all been done. So if you're going to boast in the Lord. Embrace the foolishness of God. Steve Taylor, another musician, had a song talking about what's hard. It was called "It's Harder to Believe Than Not To." So he asks the questions, are you sturdy enough to move to the front? Is it nods of approval or the truth that you want? And if they call it a crutch, then you walk with pride. Your accusers have always been afraid to go outside. It's harder to believe than not to. Harder to believe than not to. Wisdom and power and stuff are attractive. According to God, the wisdom of this world and the power of this world as it relates to eternal matters is disgustingly stupid. And so embrace what the word, embrace what the word says is disgustingly stupid. Embrace the foolishness of God for his glory and for your good.